what kind of economic systems are best at allowing us to exercise the fact that we are created in the image and likeness of God.
Now keep in mind that if you take tiny steps towards any goal, it's just a matter of when you're going to reach it.
Scarcity is the first lesson of economics. Now, the first lesson of politics is to forget the first lesson of economics.
If you don't provide real, actual value to people in exchange for the money that you're asking for in return, you will lose over time.
We can see the economy as a social web that God has created for people to serve each other with their work.
We have the Word of God that provides for us a foundation for knowledge, for truth, for beauty, for goodness, for dignity and value in human beings. We have the Word of God that provides for us things like this. Ready? Thou shalt not steal.
Ethics on the legitimacy of wealth and entrepreneurship individually. Secondly, postmillennial eschatology, that is, the kingdom of God expands across the earth before Jesus comes back in final judgment. And the link to get those two together is the idea of the pursuit of self-interest leading to widespread economic growth and social transformation.
What's up, everybody? This is another episode of Christ in Capital, the show that wants to encourage you to love God, love neighbor, and use your own personal capital to go out and build something, to make something, to provide value for someone else. Again, I'm here with Zach Johnson, my big little brother, and actually I'm not really with him right now. This is our first try at telepoding. I don't know if that's the correct term, but with all this, not necessarily free time, but with all this time we have in quarantine, I've figured out how to hook up the phone to the recording so we can do phone interviews. So first time testing it out. So how are you doing, Zach?
I'm fantastic.
That's good. What have you...
Stuck in the house.
Huh?
Just stuck in the house, having a jolly old time.
Good. Now, you're not stuck in the house like other people are stuck in the house.
No.
You still have to go to work.
Yep, I still have to go to work.
Apparently, police officers are essential. Whatever.
Those guys.
So what? I mean, in your off day or the days off, what are you using your quarantine time to do?
Work out, and then eat. And go see Andrea. That's about it.
You're going out? Ooh.
Yep. Oh.
I'm going to tell the police.
Oh.
Yeah, I was, for the listeners who don't know, actually, since our last episode, I actually had a baby. I had a little boy, and so I am now a father, and my quarantine time is taken up by him. Babies are a lot of work. They should have told me that. But yeah, it's so cool. It's interesting that I'm on paternity leave and I'm not missing out on anything because no one else is doing anything. I mean, I wouldn't be missing out anyway because I've got a bundle of joy at home, but...
You kind of got the short end of the stick.
Why?
Because if this wasn't going on, people would be at work and you would have your time off. But now people have their time off too.
They don't have time off.
Well, I mean, they're still
doesn't.
working, but they're at home doing work. It's not like...
Yeah, it's different, yeah. I wouldn't call it time off, but yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I was thinking the other day? You've been trying to get me to do this Call of Duty or like playing online video games or just getting something so that I have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
You know how they have all of those streamers, gaming streamers that have all their setups where they play video games and they do commentary over top of it, and people make a ton of money off that stuff. If you're really successful, is it PewDiePie who made like millions upon millions of dollars through YouTube just doing that?
And then there's Ninja who got big off of Fork Knife.
Fork Knife. Yeah, he was actually on the show Masked Singer. Did you see that?
I didn't.
He was one of the characters, I think, last season. But anyways, I was thinking, I was like, what if we got creative and did our podcast while we were playing a video game?
I
That
don't
way,
think that would work.
what?
I don't think it would work
Why not?
because I would probably be yelling and getting angry.
I mean, that's what people. I mean, that's what that PewDiePie guy does. He
Wait,
plays video games and he yells, right?
so if you do that, everybody that's listening, is that considered a stream or a download?
Well, what we would do is we would put the video up on YouTube, and then strip the audio of it and put it in podcasting, like the podcast catcher.
Yeah.
And so you could get video streams through YouTube, and then podcast streams through Apple and Spotify and all that stuff. I think there's more likelihood that you'll get paid through YouTube. I think YouTube probably is more open to paying people for like views and stuff like that. With podcasting, I think you have to get like advertisers to. You have to basically sell your listener base, essentially.
Yeah.
Which we love our listeners. we're not going to sell you. We're just come back, listen to us. We'll see where this thing takes us. So yeah. So maybe one day we'll do that if we can ever get it figured out how to do it. But okay, so what are we talking about today, Zach?
I don't know. You tell me.
Okay, so I'll set it up, and then I'll get your thoughts. Zach and I had 2 articles that we read over the past week, and we thought they were pretty good articles that we could discuss on the show. One of them was, I don't have the title up here. I think it was just called a better way for lockdown or something like that. Do you have the title, Zach?
Not right at the second, but I can pull it up.
Okay, well, while you're pulling that up, it was something like a better way to deal with the corona pandemic than complete lockdown or something like that. And the gist of do you have it?
An alternative to the lockdown strategy in the fight against coronavirus.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and the gist of the article was, a complete lockdown is not the solution. Like, shutting down the whole economy is not the best thing for us. It's probably worse, right? Throughout the history of the world, bad economics is probably the number one killer of human beings. Okay? When a society implements bad economic policies, that's what kills millions. So I guess I wanted to get your thoughts, Zach. What was what kind of like stuck out to you in this article? Was there anything that like you thought was interesting or that you didn't know or anything like that?
The main thing is it's not something that you really think of when you think of like an economic lockdown. But it's not just that this is going to close down stores. Businesses will have to shut down, and some of them possibly for good, since they can't make it. But it also talks about how this leads to ultimately possibly more death than what would just come from the coronavirus.
Yeah.
Suicides and health issues, stress, all that different stuff. It leads to more death than what the virus itself would do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean it makes sense to me, just right off the bat. Like I said, history shows us that bad economics is the number one killer in the world. That's just, we as human beings, when we set up bad economic policies, it results in the degradation of cultures, of societies. But one of the things that kind of irks me is on social media. There's a lot of you know a lot of talk in the social media realm about how the people who are going out right now are not essentially loving their neighbor. You're literally killing people if you go out because you're advancing the spread of the virus and all this stuff. And they're basically pitting life. It's like the argument is life. It's like people versus profits. Like, you need to care about people, or you're not caring about people. You're just caring about the profits. If you think it's okay to go out and go back to work and stuff like that. And that's fundamentally wrong-headed. I think a more accurate illustration of our scenario is that it's people versus people, right? It's the virus is hurting societies. It is killing people, but a complete lockdown of our economy will kill people, right? And the article goes on to explain how with unemployment, with 10% increase of with every 10% increase of the unemployment rate, suicides increased by 1.7%, right? And that's not if unemployment reaches 10%, then suicides go up to 1.7%. It's every increase in the rate. So if unemployment rate is 3%, then if we go up to 3.03% or whatever, the 10% increase in that, then that's a 1.7 increase in suicides. And so it's people or life versus life. We've got to find that balance between, okay, be careful, practice safe hygiene, good hygiene, and be tactical about this, all these things that we're doing to keep us healthy and safe, without destroying our economy, because that also leads to increased mortality. And I don't know. I feel like people don't understand what an economy is. We think if you equate an economy with the term profit, you don't understand what economy is, like the economy is. Our economy is people creating value for other people. They're providing supply for other people's demands, right? We're all creating something. We're all providing some sort of service or value or product for the rest of society. And if you shut that down, who's going to be there to provide food or water, shelter, or all these other things that we need?
The government.
And that right there is I think is most people's response. I mean, the government they don't create anything.
Yeah.
They don't provide anything. They don't provide any value, right? They have to reallocate, essentially. They have to take from someone else and give to another person.
Yeah.
They can't, and unfortunately, I think, most people think that it'll be, if we just shut down the economy for a couple weeks, like completely shut it down, and then just everyone let the virus die down or whatever, then it'll be okay. In those couple of weeks, the government will sustain us and whatever. They'll print money or they'll give us money or something, and we'll be okay. No, that's not how it works. Like, if there's nothing there for the government to give to someone else, they can't do it. They can't give you anything that's not been created or provided. And
they can't. The government can't take some fish and some bread and feed the masses. Only Christ can.
Oh man. Yes. Did you just Jesus juke me? No, but it's true. We can't. I've said this in past episodes, but our government cannot create. I'm going to use the fancy theological term. It cannot create ex nihilo, out of nothing. That's what it says in Genesis, that God created out of nothing. He created, right? And they can't do that, but they're consistently placing themselves in the place of God himself.
Yeah.
Right. And it's frustrating. Our economy, an economy is just people providing for each other. It's taking the raw materials of God's creation, building upon them, and providing value to someone else. That's what an economy is. That's why we think any economy that's gonna thrive essentially is going to be one that loves God, loves neighbor, and when the people are going out and building something. So, and this statistic about the suicides increasing by 1.7% was really eye-opening. So that's, yeah, I don't know how that looks. You're in a police setting, Zach. You haven't seen, and you don't have to give any like specifics, but have you seen any increase in violent activity or anything like that?
Yeah,
in your
definitely. Job? It started out the first little bit, first 2, or how many weeks into this right now? Like
Infinity.
4 or 5. Huh?
Infinity. We're like on week, what is it? It's March 97th right now.
So, yeah, it started out the first like 2 weeks. It was just dead at work. There was nothing going on. It was pretty nice. But this last week, man, it has just ramped up. Really? Craziness. People are just getting tired of people. And a lot of it is like people know that businesses are closed now, and they're either not opening back up for a while, or they close at an early time of the day, and they won't be back early or till the next day. So they're going and they're doing stuff to these buildings, knowing that they've got this larger amount of time to do stuff, to go break into a building or do something.
Like vandalism?
No, just like breaking in and stealing stuff. You got that. You got domestics. People are just getting tired of being around people. So that couples are arguing. You got a bunch of suicide threats. Luckily, where I work, we haven't had any suicides, but we've had a good bit of suicide threats. People, either they call saying they want to hurt themselves, or someone calls because they said something, or they are with them. And it's like the other day, this wife and her husband, I think they're in the process of splitting up right now, but they're still living together. They are having relationship issues, and the husband walked out back, took a gun with him, and she called us and finally got him to come back inside, but then he disappeared. And we got out there, spent 2 hours out there trying to get him to come out of the house. We weren't even sure if he was in the house, but we knew he had a gun. And I'm not going to go into the ending. It's not, well,
you don't have to go into details. But do you think
it's not what you think in the ending was? But
okay, do you think? Your job as a police officer is not to get into like motives. Well, I guess it kind of is. But
certain things.
Yeah. Do you think that? Did it have anything to do with like the stress that's being put on their relationship by, from an economic standpoint, or was it just, they couldn't stand being cooped up in the house with one another for however many, or maybe it's just a good mixture of both.
Yeah. Like we didn't get to talk to him, not because he didn't kill himself or anything, but we just didn't get to talk to him. So all we know is that she said that they had been having relationship issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so you would think that would just mean that because they've been cooped up in the house, they've been together, they're going through this separation. It's probably...
I forgot that. They had been going through the whole separation thing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was about to say, if just being with your wife, for an extended period of time gets you, to that point, that's not a good sign. But I guess if they were kind of, in those a bad situation in the first place. But
Yeah.
man, it's yeah. I think when I see on social media like posts like that where it's like you only care about profits, you only care about corporations, you only care about this, and you don't care about the people and people's feelings and stuff like that. It's like, no, I do, and I understand that our economic situation, our economic lay of the land, so to speak, has so much. It plays so much into our cultural lives. Like you can't say that the thriving of an economy, you know, at the macro level doesn't play out in the micro level in relationship with people and all this stuff. So when we say we need to love our neighbors, yes, we need to love our neighbors, and we need to think critically about what's going to be best for our neighbors. Like you can't just say, hey, get rid of the economy as long as we take care of people. It's like, no, you get rid of the economy, you're gonna hurt a lot of people. Or if not get rid of the economy, but if the decisions that you make in the economic arena are going to affect personal relationships with people. It's going to affect all of this stuff. Now, we're not saying that economics is our savior, just like the government's not our savior. But a society will push out its values in its economic policies. And so take that for however you want, but economics is so closely related to theology and philosophy that you can't just say economics over here, people and relationships over here. It's all intertwined. So one thing, Zach, that I thought was interesting, and I did a little bit of research outside of these two articles, but it was basically showing that actually during the Great Depression and a couple other of the big recessions in the United States history, like right after World War I and then the 1930s with the Great Depression, and then a couple of years later, typical mortality rates actually increased. I mean, they got better, like cardiovascular disease and a lot of these other mortality rates, except for suicides, actually decreased. And I think there's a deep-seated theological point there that when people are faced with their mortality and they realize, wow, things are actually getting bad, I actually am going to die. If they're faced with the threat of death or what have you, they start making different decisions, which I thought that whole thing was really interesting. Now, normally, in the normal course of business, the article that we read, I think, is correct. When unemployment goes up, all of the mortality metrics go through the roof, or they start going up. But it was just so interesting that during the Great Depression, that things got better, except for suicides. People are still committing suicide when, your 401k drops to zero or whatever. Your life savings are gone out the window. People do that. But that was just so interesting. I thought it wouldn't be very honest if we didn't include that in our discussion, because it's just too interesting. It's too interesting that's what happened. This is not us advocating that we just let ourselves go into a recession. But I thought that was super interesting, and we may do a little bit more discussion about that or research, but I thought I'd lay that out there. And one other thing that I thought was interesting about the article, they mentioned the Weimar Republic. Well, they didn't mention it by name, but right after World War I, Germany, which was called, they had a provisional government called the Weimar Republic set up to kind of help with the paying back of the war debts and all this stuff that came with the reparations from the war. And they talk about how like they were having so much trouble paying down their debts, paying their war debts, that the economy just kind of like plummeted. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is because another thing that happens when an economy goes down the tubes is that the people start making really bad decisions. And what happened during the Weimar Republic is they're having all this economic turmoil going on, and the government's making all these terrible decisions where they're just printing money, to pay off these debts and trying to stimulate the economy and all this stuff. And the normal people are just getting resentful, and they're hating this provisional government. I think at this point they're from 19, I think it was 20. I think I wrote the notes on from 1921 to November 1923. There was like inflation in the billions of percent. So from 1921, from somewhere around 1921 or 1922, beginning of 1922 to November 1923, there was like, I want to say like 4 billion% inflation because the government's printing money and they're doing all these crazy things to try to help service their debts. And if you think about it, billions of percent inflation in the German mark at the time, over 2 years, I think. That's like, I've heard it said this way, that's like if you go into the coffee shop to get a cup of coffee, people were wanting to pay right when they get in the door rather than afterwards, because when you get into the coffee shop, the cup of coffee is cheaper than it is by the time you finish it. Right? And so you go in for a $3 cup of coffee. Well, you pay that $3 right away, because by the time you get done in 20 minutes, it's going to be multiples of that. It's going to cost multiples of that because of the hyperinflation that was going on. Which I'm like, that's insane. That's insane. Like, I can't imagine going to a restaurant and being like, all right, bring me the check. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Like let's get this done. I'll worry about my meal later. That's crazy, but that's what was going on. That's what happened. They would have to change the vendors would have to change their prices so frequently because of how quickly their currency was inflating, or prices were inflating. And so while all this is going on and the societies had it with their government, who starts campaigning? Adolf Hitler. And so while all this stuff is going on, you've got this guy coming to rise, and he looks like a good leader. Like, he's the guy who's going to get us out of all this stuff, and he's the one that's going to set everything right, and we're gonna come through on the other end good. We'll be okay. And to kind of throw in the mix here, while these their dollar essentially is becoming worthless, major swaths of society are just like being thrown into poverty day by day, just day after day. Everyone's becoming part of the impoverished class. But it was the Jewish people in the society largely who were the ones that were pretty well off, because they were like lawyers or doctors or bankers or whatever. They had established themselves in like pretty good, they were pretty good with money, and they had good careers, and they had established themselves as like stand-up citizens of the society. But when all of this is going on, they're seen as the evil, greedy, people who are kind of making our economy go to the tubes. They're not sharing their money with us, that kind of thing. That sounds awfully familiar to what's going on right now, like pitting the profiting class, the rich, or the people who are really wealthy, or who are providing a lot of value to society, against those who are suffering because of economic circumstances, that the government itself caused in the first place. Like that scenario rings. I'm hearing those echoes in our society right now. I'm not saying we're going to lead to another Holocaust, but bad economic systems or bad economic policies do have an effect on the decisions that societies make, right? That people make. And so I just, when we hear the arguments that, this whole lockdown thing, people are getting upset with people who are struggling to make ends meet by, keeping some hours at their job, or, holding on to their career and not making their businesses go down the drain. It's okay. They're providing for society. It's okay. We have a better, we have a society that is smart. We know what we're doing. Like, we can be smart about this. Like, we can go about and not let the economy go to the tubes, but also keep safe social distancing measures and washing our hands, wearing masks, or whatever. It's not people versus profits. It's people versus people, lives versus lives. And we've got to walk that fine tightrope. But this all gets to it gets into what values does the society have. Ultimately, you have to have a society that's going to have certain values in order to walk this balanced tightrope, right? And so that kind of gets into our second article, which was I don't have the title for this one either. Do you, Zach?
Yeah, it's right here. Economic freedom is not enough for human flourishing.
Okay, and that's right. It's not. What were your thoughts? Did you have anything that kind of stuck out to you about this one? Or what was it about?
It's about what the title says. Economic freedom is not enough for human flourishing. It's not enough that we have a free market society. It's what the people do inside of that society to help others.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's perfectly put. And we're trying to hit on that here at Christ and Capital. It's like you can't just have the free society. Yes, having a free market society and having the freedom to act and use your own capital to do whatever is not enough, because freedom in the hands of people who, I'm just going to use the word corrupt, or who have, their own personal well-being as like their idol. That's a recipe for disaster. And I can already hear the argument that us libertarians are going to bring to this. They're going to say, as long as you hold to the NAP principle, which, do you know what the NAP principle is, Zach?
I don't.
Okay. The NAP principle is a big thing in the Libertarian Party, or the libertarian discussion. It's the non-aggression principle. Basically, you can't hurt people and you can't steal from them or take their things. As long as you hold to that, then society will flourish. Which, it sounds good, but who says? Who says that I have to agree to that?
Yeah.
That's not sufficient. It doesn't help anything. Just to say, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I'm a libertarian who just believes that we should not hurt people and not take their things. Well, I'm like, okay, well, the Republican and the Democrat don't agree with you on that. So just their opinion versus yours.
Yeah.
But the article was really interesting. The author's ideas, or her kind of premise, was that you need three things for a society to flourish. One of them was creativity. We need to have a society who is creative and who can think creatively. And I think creativity is the seat, or is the the seedbed of all wealth creation. We kind of talked. I think we talked last time about supply side economics, where the only way that we as a society can be creative and can advance and develop new technology and new ways of making things cheaper and better quality and all this stuff is if we have, one, the capital saved up to risk those kind of investments, but also we need to be a society that has that vision of the future, right? We have to be creative and artistic, all these things. They have to be kind of like something that our society values in and of itself. One of them was voluntary generosity. Yeah, voluntary generosity. So, government welfare is not voluntary generosity. Having the government come and take your stuff and reallocate it to someone else is not voluntary generosity. In fact, if you vote for the person who's going to come in and take other people's stuff and give it to someone else, that is not only not it's not helping. It's not being generous. It's also kind of immoral, don't you think? Like,
Yeah.
Like if I vote for, let's say, Bernie Sanders, and then I'd say, look, I've done my part. I've voted for the guy who's going to go and reallocate everyone else's stuff. That's immoral. Like that's theft on the ground level.
Yeah.
And then what is it? The culture of virtue. I don't have like a strict definition, but I do. I mean, I think it's just essentially those things that we are valuing the good things, right? We have a good work ethic, right? We're not lazy. We're not people who want to just skim by. We want to actually go out and be proactive and build and do all of these things. We don't spend our money in wrong places. So if you are struggling to provide for your family, the last thing you're gonna do is go to the casino, right?
Yeah.
I think there's people who are addicted to gambling, but that's another thing. Like addiction is you have to be able to know that you're addicted to something and fight it. That's a virtue, right? You don't just give in to your longings, right? You know that there's a higher purpose here. There's a moral goal that you need to reach. And so you don't just give in to every little, desire that you want or whatever. And I think these three things, culture of creativity, voluntary generosity, and a culture of virtue, are things that you can't get by just saying, hey, let's just have a free market society. Free market society is a good thing, and it's something that we should be pursuing, right? Limited government, more power to the people, to do with their own capital the way that they see fit. But that's not enough. That neglects the necessity of certain values being instilled in a society. And so that's why we say that society and our economy is at the ground level founded on religious or theological presuppositions. And we talked about that back in the what is it, episode 2, I think, presuppositional economics.
Yeah.
Or that might have been episode 3.
Yeah.
ultimately underlying any society, you're going to have values that are instilled in that society. And if you think that, society is just a blank slate and we just need to be free to do whatever, it'll all work out in the end, you're neglecting the fact that societies value certain things, and there are certain morals that are baked into our society. And that gets to like the whole inescapability of religion thing. Like, everyone's religious, they can't help it. We have certain values, we have certain presuppositions about the world, all this stuff. Go back, listen to episode 2, and you can kind of get a better sense of that. But it plays out not just in the individual, or in the ground level with the individuals, but it's also in nations and in cultures and economies. So the number one takeaway that we wanted to get from both of these articles is that bad economics hurts people. It hurts people. And so, saying that this whole situation about lockdown and all this stuff is about people versus profits, just stop. That's not, you're showing that you don't understand what an economy is. So just stop. And ultimately, when you dig down into what we need in order to walk the fine line between people and maintaining the economy, you have to get into what values does this economy have? What are its religious assumptions or its presuppositions? And so hopefully we can get people to start thinking about that. That's what we're here for. We want to kind of dive into that arena and start talking about those kinds of things here at Christ and Capital. And so if anyone listening has any thoughts about this stuff, like what, how can you, if you have questions about how an economy is religious, or how we're founded on religious presuppositions, email us at christandcapital@gmail.com. Get on our socials, direct message us. We want to hear your feedback. We want to engage with you guys. And if you have any questions about law enforcement, you can ask Zach. I'm not going to give you his email. But yeah, I think this is a good episode. It's hard right now when we're on a every 2 weeks kind of cadence for these episodes, because within 2 weeks you have so much that goes on, and then by the time you get to do another episode, you're like, crap, I've got a ton of stuff that I've got to determine what we want to talk about, and there's just so much. It's like you got to pick like one thing, one or two things, because you can go for a really long time. Yeah. So what do you have anything else, Zach, before we kind of wrap up?
I got nothing.
Okay. Well, we will be back to do this again in the near future, and maybe next time. Actually, probably won't. I was gonna say maybe next time we'll be back in person, but probably not. Everyone's listening. Stay safe. Practice the safe distancing. Healthy hygiene, all that stuff that the CDC is telling us. Do it. Be good, but be careful. Make good decisions about your work, your career. If you have to go to work, do it, but be tactical about what you're doing. Be safe. All these things. We're gonna walk that fine line of not destroying our economy, but also building up. Caring for people, essentially. So we are now on YouTube, so go check us out. We need a couple more views on there. We're starting small, but we would hopefully, if we can get people to start listening in there or listening to the podcasts on YouTube, we can start building up a listener base there, and YouTube maybe can start paying us. We'll see.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I think we need like lots of views though, but I don't know. We'll see. All right. Well, until next time, you guys can reach us on all of our social media sites, our email, christandcapital@gmail.com, or just leave a rate and review on the podcast, on the sites. Go leave a comment in YouTube. Yes, do that. Go leave a comment and subscribe on YouTube. We need that. We're starting small, but we need that activity. I think that's really going to help us kind of move up the ranks. So thank you guys. We will see you next time, and until then, go love God, love neighbor, and build something. Thanks.